This morning our speakers are Commander David Hamilton and Assistant Chief Fire Officer Mick Tisbury, who will be giving a presentation on their work for remediation of PFAS exposure and the history of remediation of PFAS exposure. So this session is being live streamed to our virtual attendees online and will be audio recorded. If you have any issues, you can let us know and we'll make accommodations for this session. So first, introducing Assistant Chief Fire Officer Mick Tisbury, who has been a Fire Rescue Victoria professional firefighter for 33 years in Melbourne, Australia. In his role as Vice President of the United Firefighters Union of Australia, he was the first uniformed person or professional career firefighter to address the parties to the United Nations Stockholm Convention, speaking to the firefighters' experience of PFAS exposure, contamination, and the ill effects of PFAS on professional career firefighters and fire service personnel. His contributions to research into PFAS exposure for firefighters has led to the development of operational PFAS threshold limits and best practice PFAS decontamination processes for firefighting appliances and equipment. As well, we have Commander David Hamilton, who has also been who has been an operational firefighter for Fire Rescue Victoria in Melbourne, Australia, also for 33 years. He is the president of the United Firefighters Union of Australia and has extensive experience in fire training, development, and delivery. He is the commander in charge of the PFAS project and overseeing remediation programs for the Fire Rescue Victoria, and has accompanied his colleague, Assistant Chief Fire Officer and Union Vice President Mick Tisbury at the United Nations Stockholm Convention, meeting with convention delegates and arguing the importance of listing PFHXS to Annex A, in other words, a global ban without exemptions. So without further ado, our speakers.
Thanks very much. So we'll just kick off about what is PFAS, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion. Is it PFAS, is it PFOS, is it PFO, is it PFHXS? PFAS is a whole family of these toxic chemicals, and there's about 4,500 of them. PFOS is one of them. PFO is another. PFHXS is another. But they're all part of that one big family, PFAS. So how do we get here? So Hamo and I have been on the job for 34 years. We went through recruits together. We're also instructors. We've instructed officer courses and recruit courses. We used to do our hot fire training. This is not our facility. This is a Country Fire Authority facility. It was out in regional Victoria because they could burn whatever they wanted to burn, and you didn't have any neighbours, so the neighbours wouldn't complain, basically. Whereas we couldn't do it because we're metro-based and you light a cigarette up and someone wants to kick you to death. So we used to go to Fistville and used to light it up. But we'd always get water reports. We wouldn't get the reports. They would say, yeah, the water quality's fine, the fuel's fine. Then there was a cancer cluster, and there were 8 instructors who ended up dying. They got cancer and they got died, and it was all in a very short period of time, which led to some questions being asked. And then we had one recruit course out of 14 recruits. 12 of those recruits ended up having kids with really severe birth defects. We tried to get the water quality reports. We tried to get the ground testing reports. CFA were more this is the Country Fire Authority, a little bit like the Roman Catholic Church. They were more interested in protecting the image of the organisation than they were about protecting their firefighters. So that ended up leading to a parliamentary inquiry, and that's when the truth came out and all the documentation presented. Now, they were using Agent Orange. They were using every single filthy, rotten chemical they could get their hands on because they were getting it for free. And the people who were giving it for free were wrapped because they were getting rid of their stuff, and the firefighters were using it and putting it out. There were scenarios where, so it was in regional Victoria, the scenarios, and all the water was supplied from a big dam, got recycled, supposedly recycled, and goes back into the dam. We were there doing training, and then you'd have to stop doing the training on the pad and go and put the fire out that was on the dam, because the dam water, this is our fire water, had that much shit in it, ended up catching on fire. So the state government ended up shutting down Fistville permanently. Now, they spent $80 million on remediating it, and they still haven't, that will never be opened again. It's like a toxic wasteland. One of the good things that came out of that was a recommendation for firefighters to have PFAS blood testing. There was a lot of pushback initially about allowing that to occur. The first one was, all you're going to do is increase levels of anxiety in firefighters if they know what they've got in their blood. We were able to argue back to say, well, we know we've been exposed to this shit for the past 30-something years. Our levels of anxiety are already through the roof anyway. And the other argument was, well, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. And I said, don't ever tell a firefighter something's too hard to do, because that's what we deal with every single day of the week. So you let us know what's in our body and we'll work out how to get this stuff out. And we did. So we stopped using this stuff. We haven't used PFAS containing foam since 2010. We started getting transitioning away 2007. So we shouldn't have high levels of PFAS in our blood. But then we got our test results back. The red line down there, that's for PFHXS on the bottom, and the one on the side is for PFAS. And that's what the average punter in the street's got, the average Australian has got in their blood. Those black dots is what we've got. So 23% of the participants who put their hand up to get their blood tested had high levels of PFAS in their body. So we know we've got a problem. So we transitioned away from the PFAS-free foam back in 2007. But there was a lot of negative pushback. And when you scratched under the surface, what you found is all these independent experts were being funded by the foam companies who made PFAS-containing foam. And they said it didn't work, and you had to use twice the amount, and you had to do this, and you had to do that. Nobody cares more about firefighter safety than firefighters do, because we're the ones on the end of the branch, and we're the ones that are going to fry to death if this stuff doesn't work. So we weren't going to recommend using it if it was going to kill us. So we tested it extensively in labs, in small hot fire scenarios, and then we went to the large big tank fires, and we used petrochemical facilities, and it worked. On top of that, every single B-class fire in Australia since 2010 has been extinguished using the PFAS-free foam. It works. And we've had some ball terrors. We've had some really big jobs, chemical jobs. So we thought we were good. We're finished. We've transitioned to the fluoride-free foam. We built a brand new training college, 110 million bucks. There's a brochure there. I think there's some left. Yep. Because Fiscal closed down, we built our own training facility to do hot fire training in. But before we bought that, we didn't want to buy a shit sandwich from someone else, so we tested the site before we purchased it. So we know there was no PFAS in that property when we purchased it. 2 years after we commissioned it, all of a sudden we started getting PFAS hits in our water supply. And we didn't know why. So first of all, we thought, well, if we bought a dud, this fluoride-free foam, maybe it's not fluoride-free after all. So we tested that, and there's no PFAS in it. Then we tested our trucks at the training college, and all of the trucks at the training, I think there was 8 of them, all had heavy levels of PFAS contamination in them. So then we tested the trucks around the surrounding, from the fire stations in the surrounding area, and they all had heavy PFAS contamination. So then we tested every single truck we had in the fleet. We had 250 of them, and all of them, bar 4, and those 4 were brand new, all had significant levels of PFAS contamination. So we went to the experts, and they said, well, you can't, this stuff sticks like shit to a shovel, you can't get rid of it. You're going to have to replace your trucks. Well, I didn't fancy going to the chief and saying, I'm going to get rid of 250 trucks, and you're going to have to give me the money for it. He would have thrown me out the door. So we pulled a pumper apart to find out where the legacy contamination was. And what we found, before we did that, we said, well, what's the level? So we went to EPA, we went to our workplace regulators, and we said, what is the safe level? What level are we aiming at in our water, our firefighting water? And they said, well, we were hoping you could tell us. Well, we couldn't. So then we had to, before we worked out whether we could get down to a level, we had to work out what the bloody level was. So we did a human health risk assessment just for firefighters, and we established 2 levels, one for operations and one for training. Now, the reason we've got the 2 different thresholds, ops, when we go to a job, we're wearing BA, we're wearing our turnout gear. We're there at the job for shorter periods of time. And then we're packing up, hitting it hard, packing it up and going home. When we're training, we're not wearing BA for 8 hours a day. We're not wearing our full PPC. you drench through the skin. Because what we found out is we were getting exposed to PFAS, not just when we were using foam, but there was cross-contamination, so every time we were using water. So we're ingesting it, we're inhaling it, you're absorbing it through your mucous membranes, to your eyes. There wouldn't be any firefighters on duty that doesn't have some cut or graze or scratch. So we established 70 parts per trillion, which is the Australian drinking water guidelines for our training appliances, and about 1,000 parts per trillion for operational training. We've got every single truck below 70 parts per trillion now. So we developed this 32-stage process, but this is what I'm talking about, where we found why were our trucks still contaminated, because we'd stopped using this stuff. We found the old AFFF had crystallised around the breather caps of the foam tanks and the water tanks, around the pipework where the threads are on your pipework behind the pump panel. These strainers, the inlet valves, it was the old AFFF that had crystallised over the years on the, and that was causing the cross-contamination, not just in the foam, but every time we were using water. So we developed this 32-stage process, and there was a fair bit of hit and miss at the start. So at the start, the blue lines is pre-decon, and the red line was after decon. As you can see at the start, we didn't know what we were doing. It was all trial and error. And there's probably some fancy scientific reason why, but 70 degrees Celsius seems to be the sweet spot. So we don't use any other chemicals to get rid of a chemical. We developed a manifold which we clip onto the side of the deliveries, so we reverse flush our pumpers. Yep. We reverse flush all the inlets, 70 degrees Celsius, and that keeps getting pumped through, so the water goes into the delivery, out of the feed, through an activated carbon filtration process, and then goes back into the water. And yeah, 70 degrees just seems to be the coup de grace. But now every single one of our trucks are below 70 parts per trillion. But we still have the problem of this, we've got this crap in our body, and how do we get it out? So I was one night about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was up down at the shed, and I was changing the oil on my wife's car. I thought, well, the reason you change your oil, if you just keep topping up the oil, you're going to blow the donk up. That's why you do, you change your oil. Maybe it'll work for us. So I went to the number of universities and said, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? And they said, we've been looking at this for 20 years and haven't come up with the idea, but it actually makes sense because that's what we do for people who suffer from hemochromatosis. So let's give it a crack. It's going to cost you $1.2 million. No beauty. So then I had to get funding. So I got the $1.2 million. We partnered with Macquarie University and University of Arizona, I believe, is just about they've taken our protocols and they're going to replicate the exact same study, and I'm tipping, hopefully, that they'll get the same results that we did. It's now been published and peer-reviewed, and it's available for anybody, not just a firefighter, but anybody free of charge. There's a little bit of a hiccup there. It was going to get published in The Lancet, and The Lancet wanted $50 a download. I said, no, this was the whole, I gave them a word that this would be made free of charge, not just to firefighters, but to all those affected communities, because most of those affected communities live in the lower socio-economic area. And they said, yeah, but we're The Lancet, the most prestigious in the world. I said, I couldn't care less if you're the Sports Illustrated. I just want the thing published and it's to be made free. So we went to JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. It's now been published. Anyone can, the links are up here, anyone can grab it and download it. But the results, we were aiming for a 5% reduction over a 12% time frame. The results blew us away. But before we do that, in Australia there was bugger all legislation about PFAS. Even getting information was about PFAS, and there was a lot of vested interests, a lot of organisations and even government bodies who, let's just say, they may have been more concerned about potential litigation than they were about dealing with recognising that this is an issue. So we're doing everything we're doing with the PFAS in our body. The reason that we've fought so hard to come up with a way, a technique to get this out of our body, is I explained it to someone one day, it's like having a time bomb in your body. You don't know when it's going to go off. You don't know if it's going to go off. You just want the bomb out of your body. And this is what we've done. So it's all based on the precautionary principle. So unless you can prove that this stuff is okay, stop telling me it's okay. It shouldn't be up to us to prove that it's not okay. And the evidence now shows that it's far from okay. So we had 350 firefighters. And a lot of our members who volunteered to participate in the study actually couldn't because their PFAS levels were so high, because one of the criteria was you had to be able to donate blood to the Red Cross. And because they were either getting treated for other illnesses or they were on medications which automatically cut them out of being able to donate. So we actually screened through about, I think it was 653 people, but all firefighters, but we ended up getting down to 350. The first cohort, they just did PFAS testing at the beginning of 12 months and then at the end of the 12-month period. And that was designed to see how quickly the body naturally lowers PFAS levels in their body. The second cohort were people that volunteered to donate blood. And they donated blood every 3 months, according to the Australian Red Cross blood guidelines. The third cohort would donate plasma every 6 weeks. And these are the results. So we tested actually 28 different PFASs, but the three heavy hitters were the PFOS, PFHSS, and PFOA. So the observation group showed a 0.1% drop for PFOS. So that's the body naturally getting rid of it. And remember, we've got bugger all, not much exposure to it because we've already gone for the PFAS-free foam. The blood donating group showed a 10.6% drop. The plasma donating group was a 30.1% drop for PFOS. PFHXS. Now this is the safer alternative that 3M developed to replace PFOS and PFOA. It's easy to get into our body but harder to get out. It's got a longer half-life. There was a 10.2% rise. So we don't use PFAS containing foam. We've decontaminated our trucks. Our fire stations are contaminated, we still know that. But our PPC is still full of this stuff. The blood donating group showed a 3% drop. The plasma donating group was a 30% drop. PFOA. Once again, PFOA is in our PPC, and it's also a legacy contamination of our fire stations. A 15.1% rise. Blood donating group was a 4.6% drop, but the plasma was 46.5%. Well, that made our heads explode. That was because we were aiming for, it would have been successful if we showed a 5% drop over 12 months, and that was a 46.5% drop. Every 6 weeks for plasma. Yeah, for plasma. Yeah, 3 months for blood, but 6 weeks for plasma. Yep. Yeah, but remember this was, so when this study kicked off, we got smashed with bushfires. So the whole east coast of Australia was on fire. So we were just flat out fighting fires. And then COVID came along and kicked us in the teeth too, which wasn't helpful. But even then, we still had a 98% retention rate of participants in this trial. Only 2 of them pulled out, which was sort of amazing. So they're the links. You can, free of charge, you can get on the BMJ for the protocols, and then the JAMA network for the full download of the study. And there's an article too on the conversation which sort of gives you a bit of an overview of what the study was about.
Was this part of the $1.2 million grant that you got?
Yeah, it was no grant, mate. No, I didn't go in. No, we got it, but the Fire Brigade funded. Yeah.
Appropriation though. That's what funded this for the 350.
It's no appreciate. So Fire Rescue Victoria paid for it. We paid for it out of our own budget. We got nothing from anyone.
Okay.
Yeah, it was out of our funding.
$1.2 million was for 350 people.
Yep.
For a year.
Yep. The biggest expense was the testing.
Sure. Right.
But what we wanted to do originally was test after every donation, but I just ran out of biscuits. So it was testing at the start, testing at the end of the 12 months, and then testing 6 months at the end of that to see whether the levels had gone up. We need to stop doing with donating.
So when do you stop does that,
You can keep doing it.
for as long as you're in the
This was just to see whether this works, and we now know that works. So we can't force our firefighters to do anything. We can just say, this is the way you can get this crap out of your body. If you want to go ahead and do it, go for your life. We do now include every 2 years PFAS blood testing in our medical monitoring, which FRV, which Fire Rescue Victoria pays for. It's just one of the cancer screenings. That's one of the testing. So every 2 years, you get your blood tested and you get your cholesterol and all that stuff, but PFAS is part of that. No. So we have had some pretty robust discussion with the Red Cross over this. So when we originally got our test results, this is before the study, we come up with that idea. I went to Red Cross and asked for a moratorium on firefighters donating blood, and they said absolutely no way, because the two biggest cohorts of people who donate blood are firefighters and military personnel, who just happen to be the two biggest cohorts with PFAS in their body too. But they said that, and the reason, apart from they need as much blood and plasma products as they can get, was if you need blood, you get a little bit from me, a little bit from Harry Bloggs, a little bit from Charlie Cheesecake, a little bit from Hamo. You're not getting all your blood from me. So it's going to be diluted anyway. And also with plasma, it goes into like a big bucket and it gets mixed together with everybody else's plasma if you need it. And if you're needing blood or plasma, you probably need it for a reason. So they wouldn't do that. So the other thing we're trying to work with federal government. Work is a interesting word. Trying to convince the federal government to, so there's therapeutic donations. Like if we've got universal healthcare in Australia, they can tick a box, right? The police can tick a box tomorrow and have firefighters with elevated levels of PFAS in their bodies to be eligible for therapeutic donations, and that's where they take it out of us and they throw it in the bin. So there's still a little bit of work to go in that space, and we'll win because we don't give up, and they'll get sick of us, and they'll end up just saying, yeah, okay, just go away, it's done. But we're not at that stage yet. So we can't do this on our own. So Australia is like a pimple on the world's ass, basically. So we need to support, and we need to work together with the US, with Europe, with the POMs. And that's what we've been doing. In 2019, we got requested to present to the United Nations, and we went there. And this is when they were talking about a ban on PFOA and PFOS. We got that ban up across the line, but they put exemptions in. So this is international law. You can't use this stuff anymore. However, the exemption is firefighting. So you're allowed to use it if you're a firefighter. So the most occupationally exposed cohort in the world who've got the most health problems are allowed to use it. So whilst that was an interesting first step, and it was the first time that they've been talking about this for 20-something years, and the president afterwards of the UN said it was remiss of them. They've been talking about firefighting, but they've never spoken to end users. They've never spoken to a firefighter before. And would we go back to it's called the POP-RC, which is the Persistent Organic Pollutant Review Committee. And that's like the expert panel that advises the UN about banning stuff. So PFOA and PFOS got added to the Annex A, which is elimination, with the exemptions. Then we went at the Rome and argued why exemptions shouldn't be included. And that was for PFHXS. So PFHXS was the new, viewed, safer alternative to PFOS and PFOA, but 3M developed. Had some pretty interesting conversations. That was in Rome. Had some pretty interesting conversations with the bureaucrats and the diplomats and the scientists, and it was going nowhere. So I said, "Come outside. Let's go outside. I want to show you something." And we're outside of the UN building on a busy road, and I said, "Now picture a a fuel tanker has just rolled over and crashed right in front of us, and it's now on fire. What do you want me to do? Because I'm in charge. I've got a shitload of trucks. I've got 30 trucks here. We've got a heap of foam. What do you want me to do? So we'll put the fire out. I said, no worries. So we'll put foam on this. And we're on a bit of a slope, so that's going to run down to that creek there. What do you want us to do? Oh, well, the international law says you have to contain it. I said, cool. How do I do that? Oh, you get some bunding, you do that. I said, cool. So that's my priority? Yep, because you got to follow the law. I said, cool. So what are all you people now? All you people are going to die because you've got me concerned about capturing this fuel. What about rescuing the people? What about me firefighter safety, putting the fire out and protecting the exposures and performing rescues out of the UN building? And that's when the penny dropped. Because they said, oh, they were talking about major hazard facilities. I know you can capture it because you can put an impervious membrane in the bunded areas. So yeah, what happens when that catches fire? It's plastic, it melts. That's when they started listening to us. And I'm pleased to say that we ended up getting this legislation passed. So PFAS has been banned with no exemptions. But what that means is the PFOS and the PFOA bans become null and void. Because you can't have PFOS and PFOA, you can't have PFHXS without PFOS and PFOA in it. So those exemptions they gave for PFOS and PFOA are now gone, or they will be at the end of the year. So it was a fantastic outcome.
Thank you, Arthur. I now give the floor to the United Firefighters Union of Australia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Secretariat, delegates, participants. First, let me just thank you for the opportunity to address this very important forum. My name is Mick Tisbury. I'm an Assistant Chief Fire Officer at Fire Rescue Victoria and a delegate of the United Firefighters Union of Australia. I'm here representing not only Australian firefighters, but also over 500,000 professional firefighters from across the world. As a professional firefighter for over 33 years, I, along with my colleagues across the world, are unavoidably exposed to thousands of toxins every fire we attend in order to save life, property and the environment. These exposures are unavoidable due to the nature of our job. However, PFAS exposure is completely avoidable due to the effective and safer alternatives that are currently available. Whilst there are constant arguments about whether PFAS is harmful to humans, there is no argument about its persistence or the fact that it is an endocrine disruptor. As an end user and representative of some of the most occupationally exposed cohort of people on the planet, it is somewhat irrelevant of how many cancers or diseases PFAS is linked to. The fact that it is an endocrine disruptor means that our high levels of PFAS, inclusive of PFHXS in our blood, makes us more susceptible to those unavoidable exposures known as Category 1 carcinogens. For 33 years, I've attended far too many funerals of my fellow firefighters. Many of these have succumbed to cancer after a long battle, and we give up quantity and quality of life to serve our communities. Never have I seen any chemical company representatives, government delegates or statutory body representatives attend these funerals. It's just firefighters and their families burying their own. Firefighters in affected communities are not expendable commodities, just so multinational chemical companies can increase their profits or sell more products into the market. In Australia, fire services no longer use any PFAS-containing firefighting foam. We are a fluorine-free firefighting profession, and these fluorine-free foam concentrates are just as effective in extinguishing B-class fires as the fluorinated products were. Fire Rescue Victoria transitioned to fluorine-free foam in 2010, and we've successfully decontaminated every single one of our fire trucks. In spite of this, 12 years later, our firefighters are still suffering the effects of legacy PFAS exposures, including PFHXS, due to the long half-lives of these persistent chemicals. Recently, with our blood testing, showed we still had elevated levels of PFHXS in our blood. The adding of PFOS and PFOA to Annex A of the Stockholm Convention with exemptions, whilst a positive first step, actually makes it impossible for firefighters to comply with. This is due to our emergency response obligations and priority. we can't contain firefighting foam in an emergency situation. We've recently tested our firefighters with a PFAS blood intervention study. Now, whilst we showed pretty significant decreases of both PFOS and PFOA in alignment with the accepted half-lives, there were increases of PFHXS blood levels in the no intervention cohort, despite drastically reducing our PFHXS exposures. It is with this knowledge I urge the delegates of the Stockholm Convention to list PFHXS to Annex 8 without exemptions, as was recommended by the Persistent Organic Pollutants Review Committee. I'm here to discuss all these points I have raised to explain any operational or emergency response context that may arise from the important decisions this international body may decide. And finally, I'd like to offer my solidarity to my brother and sister firefighters in the Ukraine who are currently being slaughtered for trying to protect their communities. I thank you for your time. So we got that passed. Now, what are we doing for our fire stations? So we stopped using it, we've cleaned our trucks, we've worked out how to get this stuff out of our body, but we know that our fire stations are heavily contaminated because we've tested them. All 85 of our fire stations are heavily contaminated with PFAS, legacy contamination. That gets into the groundwater, but it's also getting into the neighbouring properties. So we've tested a lot of those neighbouring properties. Now, we're not ducking and weaving. We know what we've done. We didn't do it intentionally, but we have poisoned our community. We have affected those neighbouring properties. So we're testing those stations, we're testing the adjoining properties, and we're doing remediation. So we've just finished remediating a pretty heavily contaminated fire station in Corio, which is in an industrial area, but it flowed straight, the groundwater and the storm water flowed straight into a creek and a lake, and kids swim in that lake. So that was the first one that we went, we've just finished decontaminating. So all sites are going to be different, and it all depends on whether the type of soil, groundwater receptors, whether you're next to a lake, a creek, or residential or industrial commercial area. But with this particular site, the whole site was heavily contaminated because there was a long history of PFAS containing foam use here. So we ground down the top part of the concrete, the first 5 to 10 mil. That was all captured. And then we used like a penetrative product, a sealer, and then we applied a topical UV rated sealer on top of that. What that did is that stopped the PFAS in the soil underneath the concrete being sucked back into the concrete, but also stopped the surface water penetrating the concrete and spreading that contamination further around. The other thing we did is we treated the soil boundary of the fire station, because most of our stations are full of concrete, but the boundary, we dug up all that soil, and one of the biggest expenses is removal of that soil and getting it thermally destroyed. If you can keep it on site, you save yourself a fortune. So we treated it with it's a product called Rembind, and it's like a powder, and what that does is it locks it doesn't get rid of the PFAS, but it locks it into the soil, and so it stops it migrating. So you can eat the soil and you shit it out. You can eat your tomatoes, and we found it's not sucking the PFAS out of the soil into your tomatoes. So it's breaking that chain. It doesn't spread. And then we developed a big, it's like near the point of discharge at the fire station where all the storm water pipes went into, like a big storm water pick, and we used it's called Rem Gate. So it's like an aggregate that is coated with Rembind, and it sucks the PFAS out as the water goes through. That was designed by hydraulic engineers, like I talked about, a bit of trial and error, and it was designed to cope with a flooding, the 1 in 100 year flooding event. What it wasn't designed to do was cope with 5 100-year flood events in a 5-week period, is what we got down there. We just got slammed, so we got from bushfires but climate change doesn't exist. And then, so we've redesigned that, and we've just finished up the follow-up 6 monthly testing, and it was a 98.7% reduction. So we're wrapped about that. And that will probably be a blueprint that we use going forward with our future fire stations. So where to next? So as you can see, we're not using this stuff anymore. Yet the observation group still had increases of PFAS and PFAS. Our PPE, our turnout gear, has got PFAS in it. Even the ones that are marketed that doesn't have PFAS in it. So Gore, we asked for samples from Gore. They said there was no PFAS in it. We tested it. We used a taper analysis, and there's chock-a-block full of it. We haven't been able to find that link yet. It's well, there's more work that needs to be done in how much of that product on the PPE ends up into us. So that's where we're working on next, and of course the remediation of our fire stations. There's only 5 fire stations. There's only Hamo and I. It's going to take us a long time to remediate those stations. But the number one thing, which this is now sitting on, it's been something I've been working on for 3 years with a whole battalion of lawyers, both from here and in Australia, is I want to sue the hell out of 3M because they knew what was going on. They knew that these products were dangerous in the 70s. And there's a class action that's about to be launched. I'm just waiting on the Attorney General to sign off on it. But it'll be a dual jurisdictional court case, both here in the States and over in, because they're the ones that need to be held to account. They're the ones, it shouldn't be the taxpayers or the fire services having to find the funding to do this. It should be that multinational chemical companies who have made a gazillion bucks out of this, knowing full well that their products were harmful, knowing that this stuff, it was marketed as being 100% biodegradable. It was marketed as being just like dishwashing liquid. So of course firefighters, being firefighters, we used to use it to wash our dishes, scrub down the barbecues. It was a great engine degreaser, so the engine bay floors. You guys get, not down here, but Yanks get, you get a white Christmas. We don't. So we make a white Christmas for the kids at the fire station at Christmas time using foam. So, but none of it was done intentionally. None of it was done maliciously. Not by us. 100% it was by the multinational chemical companies because they were making bazillions of dollars. So they need to be held to account. So that's the next thing we'll be working on as well. And that's about it.
Yesterday they talked about like deer and disposing of deer and like deer ending up in a landfill and stuff. Is there I hate to use the word burning, but does burning eliminate it?
Yes. But it's got to be done at temperatures in excess of 1200 degrees Celsius. That's the only way you can break that carbon fluoride chain. So we use the cement kiln process in Australia for the destruction of, so there's in Australia we use a cement kiln because the temperatures are high enough and it goes through the process slow enough, and we've done a lot of testing with it. So we've tested the emissions coming out of the chimneys afterwards, and there's nothing coming out of the chimneys. But so 98% of the PFAS gets destroyed, but 2% then gets permanently bound onto the concrete. But it's non-leachable, so it's no longer the issue. There are some incineration methods that are used which are not effective because they're not burning it with temperatures high enough, or the product, whether it's foam concentrate, turnout gear, the activated carbon filters, because you've got to actually dispose of the filters after you suck the guts out of whatever you're doing. If they're not at over 1200 degrees Celsius, all you're doing is spreading it further afield.
Mine's not a question, but I just wanted to say thank you to both of you because I had the opportunity both to meet you and then Mick, you shared the video, which I hope everyone in this room can have access to watch as well. But it was a documentary done in Australia about the two of these gentlemen traveling around. It's a tremendous 30 minutes of time that you should watch. And whether you're here in the training class today or you've been traveling around the world and speaking up for firefighters and for doing the right thing, I know from watching that you were attacked personally, very personally, for trying to do the right thing. And that's just tremendous work and just very honorable thing to see and experience and be in front of you guys. So thank you.
That's highlighting a journey. And this this has been a journey, and has been very personal for both of us, but in particular Michael. But it highlights, it's important for us to share our story, and it's not just as simple as removing foam off your trucks. It's that whole journey that then it's led into decontamination, the blood study, and of course now where we are with PPC and everything else. We started this 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and I know some people in this room are going, wow, where do we start? Well, remove the foam. Start there. Start your journey. We can only tell you what we've done. It's your journey from here. Start to remove this stuff where you can. I know it's not going to be easy. We've taken a personal toll on us, but you only reap what you sow, I suppose. So thank you.
But you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we've done a lot of the hard yards. So if you got a better way, we don't need to tell you how to suck eggs. If you've got a better way, let us know and we'll do it. But if you haven't, then we're happy to share, because there's now companies out there who want to rape and pillage firefighters. And they're using our techniques and technologies to on-sell to fire services for $250,000 per truck for a decon. That's our technology. We'll give it to you for nothing, and it costs between $7,000 and $10,000 per appliance to decontaminate properly, and we'll give it to you for nothing. So grab one of our cards, and we'll flick everything we've done, everything we've got, all our policies, all our procedures, all our documentation. We're happy to share with. We'll only share it with fire services. We won't share it with third parties, but we'll give it to you for free.
On there, do you have a list of all the safe alternatives to the foam?
I can tell you what we use. We use Solberg 3x6. So it's actually made in America. Perimeter Solutions, Solberg. That's what it's marketed in Australia, but they're here in America now. So it's called Perimeter Solutions. I can't tell you. We can't advertise any brand, but I'll tell you what we use, and we use it for a reason. And every fire service uses the same. But you guys make your own decisions. Yeah. Solberg 3x6 rehealing foam.
And you need to, and you may not need to decontaminate your trucks. Our trucks might be different to yours. You might store the foam on you might have foam tanks on your appliances. You need to have the historical information from your fire stations. Speak to your firefighters. Where did you keep the foam? If you stored it somewhere, you would have contaminated that facility will be contaminated. If you've stored AFFS over long periods of time, it'll be contaminated in the soil. You spill it, it gets spilled. So you need, we're not telling you that that's what you have to do, but we know that that's worked. You're going to have to apply it to your fire service. You're going to have to apply it to your appliance. You're going to have to apply it to your methods of work. So it's a journey.
You mentioned the truck testing, water testing, blood testing. Is that something that a typical local lab can't do, or do they need to be specialized?
If they're going to be accredited. So in Australia, it's called NATA accreditation. But we use Envirolabs in Australia, and I just found they're here as well in America. But you just ask them. Some are accredited for blood. Some are accredited for the whole lot. Some are only accredited for soil or water. But I think they're all going to be accredited soon, mate, because they can see the money on the writing on the wall that this is the next asbestos kind of thing, and so they can companies in it to make as much money as they can. So.
And to get firefighters tested for the level of contamination, you just go to a lab and ask for PFAS testing?
Yeah. So I know Envirolab do that, but once again, I can't advocate for it. We use Envirolab. They were the best ones that we found. It might be, I don't know, Uncle Sam's thing over here. Who knows? It could be, yeah.
We understand you're not selling anything.
Yeah.
But there's a cost to it, obviously. It's dearer than a normal blood test. It's specific testing.
So it cost us about 400. We negotiated pretty hard with them because we've been like the front in Australia and at the forefront. So it's not just they're not looking at just testing at the start 600 firefighters. They're looking a little bit further down the line that because we've been so successful, it's now longer. We've got 4,500 firefighters now in our fire service, and then you've got the other states. And even though the other states may not want to be doing it, they're now being shamed into doing it because we've raised the bar in Victoria. And it's like, well, we get sort of... Some of the other states aren't happy about what we're doing because it's forcing them into... Yeah.
You mentioned the costume gear yesterday. Do y'all use it for extrication, or is there anything else? What could you kind of talk about it a little bit?
Sorry, the what?
Yesterday, yeah, you mentioned that y'all had some like faux gear. That was like
Oh, no. So what I was talking about, that. So we have kids' turnout gear, and we have, so it looks like our turnout gear, but it's not. It's just fake. The same as the stair climbs. Instead of doing the stair climb, the charity events in the full PPE, we know this stuff's full of PFAS. We've now produced imitation. No, we don't use it for, it's only for public events and, stuff like that. We don't use it at a fair dinkum job. Shit, no. We have our structural firefighting, so we have 4 sets of structural firefighting gear for each firefighter. Then we have 2 sets of wildfire gear, which is like, what's it? It's a lighter version for bushfires. And then we have, wildland gear. And then we have 2 sets of, if you're a heavy rescue operator, for doing cutouts of cars. If you're on the van, two sets of overalls as well, which is still, they've got fire retardant, it's got the ProBound on it, but it's not, it's not the structural firefighting gear. No, the PR stuff is something separate again. We don't get issued with that, but we've got a store that if you got a carnival or something, you go into a fete, then you can bring the fake stuff along, and they can, the kids can put in their firefighters. Same as putting our filthy gear onto the kids,
Have you guys done testing on your stationware?
Yeah.
Do you have no meds in it?
The Peasley study they were talking about yesterday? That's our stuff, mate. So that was our gear. So we gave that to Graham Peasley too. So it's chock-a-block full of it. Even though you go and speak to the manufacturer, Gore-Tex, no, it's all fine. It's all, I can do it, nothing to see here. That's what we...
You replaced all of your stationware?
Oh, stationware, sorry, no, we've tested with stationware. Our stationware is fine. There's nothing in the stationware. I thought you were talking about the structural firefighting gear. Oh, this stuff here, no, we tested the hell out of this here before. Yeah, no, this is all fine. There's nothing in that, yep.
Is it fire resistant
Yep.
clothing?
So we'll wear this under our structural, oh, sorry.